All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio, 15th day, hour number 15th day of May, hour number 2. We continue on. We're going to get into some news now. We're going to get into another site that is dedicated to exposing a bunch of BS, but this is from somebody who's close to the Beltway. I want to welcome back onto the program against cronycapitalism.org's very own Nick Sorrentino. Nick, thanks for joining me tonight.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Happy to
Nice
join.
to get. Yeah, it's nice to get you back on. I had forgot that you and Gary are close neighbor. Gary Hendershot are close cousins down there, I guess, close neighbors right there in the political beltway. And if I remember right, weren't you last time you and I spoke? You were involved a little bit in some consulting for these clowns.
Sure.
And how's that going?
And I continued to be. It's funny because last night I listened to a great speech by the economist Murray Rothbard, and somebody asked him a question, and they said, who is your favorite president? And Murray Rothbard was not a fan of government generally, and he really didn't have any favorites. But there was one guy that he liked, and that was Martin Van Buren. And the reason why I liked him is because he kept true to his principles, but was still able to maneuver within the system and get positive things done, especially on the banking front. I kind of hope that as I do my work, I kind of adhere to the same philosophy. I don't bend my
Principles.
what I stand for, and people know that, and that's one of the reasons why people hire me in this swamp we call Washington.
And swamp indeed, but right now it's obviously by some of the headlines a very prosperous swamp. There's a ton of money rolling around there.
There is absolutely a ton of money. As I go into Washington, I mean, there are. It used to be that going into Manhattan, one saw the most, Ferraris or Bentleys, and I think, although Manhattan's probably still ahead of the game, but Washington seems to be catching up pretty fast.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Peter Schweitzer, who wrote the book "Throw Them All Out," recently did a story on Washington D.C., the boomtown. He was talking about the Lamborghini dealership in town and how it was underperforming the other Lamborghini dealerships in, say, Beverly Hills and in South Beach, Florida. And the reason why they're underperforming is not because they're not selling cars. They're selling plenty of cars. They're underperforming because people aren't financing the cars. They're just buying them cash. So the company's not making any money on the financing.
Yeah.
And that stands in contrast to South Beach and
where they're still financing it.
That's right.
And I talked a little bit about it in the last hour that from a business standpoint, from what I do outside of my website, I see a glut of the same excess, a glut of the same planning, which was a horrendous, horrible failure. I see it all happening again. This is in the building sector, and I've been harping on this. If you have an opportunity to take advantage of current situation to prepare for the future, it's your time now. And it's not just in the West here. It's across this country. Everybody's punch drunk again. I mean, it's not to the same levels. It probably is in D.C. It's probably worse than it has ever been as far as a glut of money and out of control, literally, totally, completely out of control government spending. It's probably worse there than ever. But in the rest of the country, it's pushing the levels of 2007, 2008, and it's not going to last. It's just not going to last. So take advantage of your time now. Agreed?
Well, I wrote a piece about how I think that the Federal Reserve and their friends and central banks around the world are doing everything they can to blow up another bubble, and it looks like after years and years and years and years of trying, that bubbles are starting to form here and there.
Sure.
The problem is, I'm 37 years old. Since I graduated college, my entire working life, I've never worked in an organic economy.
That's right.
Pretty much when I graduated, the tech bubble, I graduated in 2000. The tech bubble was in the process of deflating. Then they ramped up the housing bubble, and I can remember in 2004, just I'm like thinking, where am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life here? Where can I go? Well, housing was growing, and that was before I had gotten schooled on on proper economics, let's say. But it always felt hollow. It felt like cotton candy. And the economy now, to the degree that it is moving in the right direction, at least in this country, it seems to me, it feels very cotton candy. Like there doesn't feel like there's a lot underneath it at all. I mean, I'm not complaining that my 401k is going up in value, but I know there's nothing under it.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is, I would suggest that the wise person would be very, very careful and remember the lessons learned over the past decade and a half.
Oh, I couldn't agree with that more. Moving forward, you talk about the economy moving forward, the perception of expansion, right? I mean,
yes.
I'm assuming that's what you're talking about.
Yep.
Because I'm just a few years older than you, but I'm in the same boat. I've never lived in an organic economy. I've lived in the Reagan, the Reagan years where it was build out of big government. The Reagan conservative big government and the expansion of the military. That was a false economy. The 1971, the closing of the gold standard, and everything since then has been fantasy fiat and boom and bust, and it's going to continue. The span between the busts are becoming shorter, and they're becoming a lot more violent.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to set yourself in a position in order to take to handle what's coming next. And honestly, we don't know. We don't know what's coming next. You and I are gonna see some interesting times in our lives.
Have we seen enough interesting times?
we have for sure.
Man, it's gotten real interesting. No, I totally agree with you. And I mean, I would encourage everyone to. I'm going to put out a little plug here for David Stockman's book, which I reviewed on our site. And I actually know Mr. Stockman. I think he's a pretty cool guy. That book is 720 pages of basically how the United States has blown bubble after bubble after bubble. It's very good. And I would encourage.
What is it? Give us a title and where we can get that. Go ahead.
It is The Great Deformation. It was originally going to be called The Triumph of Crony Capitalism, as I understand it. But it is a book that discusses in depth crony capitalism and specifically the prime mover of crony capitalism, the Federal Reserve and its monetary policy.
Well, I like the first title. I mean, the title's great, but I think the first title is accurate. It's one. To this point in time, it's one. It's what we have. I mean, and until it collapses under its own hubris or some other evil design that's going to be put into its place, it's running the show. But and we might differ on how long it's going to last and what's going to come next. But I'm a firm believer that this current economic model, where you have Lamborghini dealerships that have a problem because they can only deal in cash in Washington, D.C., that cannot last. Want it or not to, it cannot last. It's not feasible and it's not possible. So, that system's going to go, it definitely won't. We're going to come up on a break here in any second, and I don't want to get into the top stories that you're covering. I did a little news rant at the beginning of the program. I'm going to touch on some of those topics, and you and I will break them down and have a little bit of fun for the remaining 45 minutes of the program. Nick Sorrentino of againstcronycapitalism.org is our guest. We'll be right back. Hang tight. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. We talked about the sins that we are involved in during the break there. Those listening on Justin TV. And we got on the topic of we all do things that we know that are not good for us, but we do them anyway. That's human nature, and sometimes we get a little uptight, especially in this community, about anything that is obviously we were talking about Coke, Diet Pepsi, that kind of thing. And we know there's the aspartame in them, and they're not good for you. But there's something about a nice cold ice, freezing Diet Coke or Pepsi when it's hot out that just hits the spot. And I hate to admit it, but I partake in one of them too once in a while. I'm just sharing the story. If you were listening in JTV and you heard, that's what we were talking about there. I did the opening piece in the first hour. Nick, about and a commentary video that's coming out tonight. It's probably up right now, in fact, where I break down a few of the headlines that are dominating the news, and try to show. I mean, it's my perspective, right? This is what Wide Awake News. I mean, this is I believe that the media that is dominated by corporate special interests. That's a fact. It's not conspiracy. 6 companies own 90%. And they all benefit from collusion.
Sure.
When they let these stories out, I'm just going to run down. I'm not going to cover them because I want you to cover them. Gun control, IRS scandal, Boston bombing, the Federal Reserve, $84 billion a month, Benghazi. These are just a few, right? These are just a few that are controversial right now, especially Benghazi, the IRS scandal, gun control. These things are, they're fueling the internet. They're fueling, quasi-independent media such as Drudge, who is he's having a field day with the different scandals that are popping up almost every single day. But it's backwards looking, and that was my point in the video tonight. And the question I want to bring to you: do you see when we're talking about these things? These are culmination results of failures of the past. And it's not really giving us news of where we're going tomorrow. It's giving us news that can keep us arguing amongst ourselves, blue and red, right now. Am I off base here, in your opinion?
No, I think that's fair to say. But I would also say, as the old cliche, past is prologue.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what happens with Benghazi significantly affects the next election. Now, how much do you care about the next election, given, that it's it's 2 clubs that basically hang out together. There's another issue. But I think what's that?
That you can testify to personal experience.
Sure. Go ahead. Absolutely. I mean, they're different flavors for sure. And people will get worked up at one another. But, let's be honest. The Bloods and the Crips run the same, business model. And, that's, it's not unsimilar in Washington. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Now, saying that, even as easy as it is to demonize Washington, D.C., and I do it every single day, there are good people here and there.
Sure.
I always have to throw that out. But anyway, as far as looking backward, I do think that it matters. I do think Benghazi matters because I think it is potentially, from the sounds of it, really just a huge... potentially a real lapse of just leadership on many, many levels, and then they may or may not have tried to make it look like it didn't
right,
look.
Well, let's break it down. You have a minute before this first break. Let's break down Benghazi. Great, it's all over, right? It's a big deal. Sure. I mean, the neocons saying this could bring it all down. This could bring down the Obama administration.
Sure.
It ain't gonna, but
no, it's not.
But go ahead, give us a minute. Give us an overview, and then we'll pick it up more after the break.
I mean, basically, as the story goes, I mean, so the attack happens in Benghazi, and the administration. There are many different versions of the Benghazi thing. I know we got a minute here, so that essentially is whitewashed coming out of the State Department. They don't want to deal with the issue right before the election. So they make it as soft, they downplay it as much as possible, and in the process completely lie about it, about why it happened and so on.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a legit issue, neocon or not.
No, I concur. It's something that was an obvious cover-up. Is that illegal for me to say that now? But it was an obvious cover-up during the debates. The debates.
Right.
This is my air quote. The debates that weren't debates. The staged questions that went on, and Benghazi was kicked to the curb real quick and sidestepped. But I guess in hindsight, as far as I'm trying not to sound really callous and cold here.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up here. Okay. Hillary Clinton herself said, "What difference does it make?" And I want to pick up on that point when we come back with Nick Sorrentino of Against CronyCapitalism.org. We'll be right back. Hang tight. Okay, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Nick Sorrentino, Against CronyCapitalism.org. Are you you're the primary owner, right? You're one of the owners of it.
I founded this website with a guy named Hunter Lewis.
Okay, and I remember that. I remember there was a partner involved, and yep. I didn't want to misstate your title.
No.
Against CronyCapitalism.org, the real problem with the economy. Is that your tagline? The real problem with the economy?
It is indeed. That is
right. I love the site, guys. Go there, bookmark it. And as you heard on Justin TV during the break there, as our conversation continued on, Nick does a great job of keeping one foot in, one foot out, and trying to show the nexus between the two. It's important work, because that is where, if you envision, I'm a left brain guy. If you envision, this wall where the flakes are falling off and the flakes are the mainstream, we need the guy right on that edge, shaving off the people who are dumbed down and duped, and getting them over to the reality side, and that's what your site does. So Against CronyCapitalism.org, bookmark it, go there, visit it, and enjoy Nick's work. All right, let's get back into Benghazi. Let's break this down. Let me break down what difference does it make Hillary Clinton moment, and how true that statement was. Because in my estimation, in my opinion, and my commentary has been such, and will continue to be, the whole thing should be hung around the neck of crony capitalist government.
Sure.
Because we shouldn't have been there in the first place. We deposed.
It was illegal.
It was illegal, and that is my frustration with establishment media, and my frustration with establishment politics is that we get a story about Benghazi, horrible event that it may be, but it shouldn't happen in the first place, and the root cause of the event is never questioned. Not only is it never questioned, Nick, we're about to do it again. We have the next Secretary of State issuing threats today against Assad that he better step up with the forced settlement, or we're going to back a bunch of terrorists. And it's Al Nusra. That's who we're backing. And that is where that's where the knots in my stomach come in.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I mean, again, I look at it specific to the Benghazi issue. The big issue for me, and I've said this from the very beginning, is that the war in Libya, in my opinion, was absolutely, totally illegal.
Yes, sir.
It was a horrible, horrible mistake. And frankly, I consider it a huge. It should not have been done.
Right.
It should not have been done. It was illegal, as I said.
Illegal, but it gets taken out of the narrative altogether, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But I look at it this way. Sometimes folks like us, we want to get to the heart of the matter, the truth, and just expose it for the whole world to see, and just rip it out into the open and be like, look, here it is.
That's what I want to do. That's me.
And I hear you, and I do too. But I also believe that there is something to be said for when you're talking about very large, powerful vested interests, that sort of tack is not necessarily the wisest one. And with Benghazi, I would say, there is a chance that if this continues to grow as an issue, that why were we in Libya in the first place may start to filter in. It probably won't, but there's a significant chance that that subject will be brought up, whereas it absolutely wouldn't have been prior to this.
Yeah, I understand that argument, and I can see that, and I do believe that there are people that chip away at the current status quo, one piece at a time. But when you say that, the image that comes into my mind is Rand Paul, and I'm more of a Ron Paul.
Oh,
Rand Paul wants to dance with the devil, and again, go ahead.
I mean, you're right. You never make a deal with the devil. You never do, because you always lose. And trust
with
me.
that said, like I said when we came back from that break,
yeah,
we need people that are, casting the hook and bringing people over, bring them over to the light. So I mean, we need all segments that are moving towards this enlightened, wide awake state. You're doing a good job there on that. I want to talk a little bit here. We got 4 minutes in this, and then 10 minutes after. I want to talk a little bit about division, right? The division that you're seeing in Washington D.C. because it's chorus. It's so scripted, in my opinion, that here it is. It's mid 2013, and we're starting it, brother. Here we go. We're gonna divide up the neocon or the right and the left, and we're gonna go to war.
For sure. Syria just makes me sad.
Yeah,
I mean, it really does. I'm just like, what are you people doing? I mean,
I'm talking, Syria, of course, but I'm talking Beltway.
Oh yeah. Organizing for action is, for instance, is the ultimate. Well, maybe not the ultimate, but darn near the ultimate crony capitalist vehicle if there ever was one, and that's Obama's essentially election team continuing on.
Right.
They're soliciting huge corporations. They want the bucks, and the bucks are starting to flow in. We're in a permanent election cycle now. There is no period where we're not running for something, and but that's just the way it is. Life has been sped up in every way.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And while we're talking, Benghazi, Syria, here we just keep tripping $1 trillion a year in debt and tripping down the road and
sure.
IRS scandal.
Yeah.
Give me your take. It's not a shock to me. I mean, duh.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much assumed this was standard.
Yeah, right. And all you got to do is be a minimal student of recent history, and government is watching people who are speaking out, and it's scary, and it's shocking in and of itself. But when this IRS story comes out, to me, I see political wrangling. Again, just another thing to get the fires
Absolutely.
lit for the next cycle.
Yes and no. I do think that there is. I deal with a number of folks who I'm friendly with on a professional and a personal level who are left of center solidly, and political types. Not like into kind of the stuff we're into, but
right.
And it struck them. These are people who are pretty partisan, hacky folks. And they were like, that's pretty messed up.
Really?
Yes. And so what that tells me is politics just changed a little bit. How long it'll last, I don't know. But I do think, like, for instance, and I don't even want to get into this, but like Rand's thing on the Senate floor, I think that changed things a little bit. Now, I don't even want to get into what happened after that.
Oh, boy. We're not going to.
I know. But it did for like a moment. Anyway.
Yeah, it did. But that's the thing.
I know.
You nailed it for a moment. That's the thing. It's all designed for the moment. We'll argue about. Go ahead.
No, I don't think so. I think that what you're seeing is just all the stuff that has been built up in the body politic finally kind of reaching into the halls of Washington to some degree. I think there's something happening potentially. I mean,
Okay, let's
yeah,
get into that.
I really do.
Let's get into that because you're there, and you're this. You cover this kind of thing, and if you're seeing a bona fide shift, is it?
I'll say shift.
Okay, to what? Is it to freedom? Is it to return to constitutional republic, or is it we're going to go from far crazy $1 trillion left to far crazy $1 trillion deficit right? Or I mean, go ahead. I'm all ears.
Man, I wish I could tell you absolutely what we're going to do is have a constitutional,
Return to a republic type of deal.
Sure, and let me put it this way: 5 years ago, that didn't exist at all. Prior to Ron Paul running, I mean, this kind of talk was not even thought of. Never mind spoken about in Washington D.C.
Yeah. Now, if you speak about it, you got the IRS and DSH, and
but at least you got somebody talking about it.
That's true.
Different.
They figured out how to tase you.
That's right.
All right, we're going to be right back with Nick Sorrentino of againstcronycapitalism.org and more Wide Awake News Radio. Final segment coming up. Hang tight. Againstcronycapitalism.org. Nick Sorrentino, he's our guest tonight, and this is our final segment. I'll bring up the topic of the end result. What is the end result of crony capitalism, Nick?
As we were discussing in the break, it is it is a concentration of wealth at the top. Basically, what you have is industry partnering with government, and the government apparatchiks and the industry apparatchiks get together, form a club, and consolidate power and wealth at the top, while the serfs get to enjoy their debt servitude. That's basically what happens.
Beautiful. That you should put that on a video. That's an absolutely excellent analogy or a definition of what we're looking at, and that this is the system that hopefully you're, like you said in the last break, and I want to pick up on that now for the remainder of the time. You're seeing a little bit of change, and or a little bit of momentum, maybe of Middle Earth here, Middle America, pushing opinion in D.C. Break that down a little bit. I mean, are you optimistic that we are going to push towards something a little more free and a little more the founder's intent?
I am always optimistic because, frankly, if one is not optimistic, things start looking really ugly. And I'm not saying and I'm optimistic for a good reason too, though. I mean, what's interesting is I don't know how many times I have my my Ron Paul 2008 sticker on my car, and I don't know how many times young people have come up to me, like the guy delivered pizza, and the guy was selling lawn treatment. He's like 19, 20 years old. He's like, man, I like your bumper sticker, Yeah. And I was wearing a Murray Rothbard Enemy of the State shirt at a state park, and the park ranger, who was probably in her mid-20s, said, "I love that shirt."
So you're thinking that the next generation coming up, and that that is a direct threat to crony capitalism.
It is
because you have, I hate the word disenfranchised, but it's accurate. You take a whole segment and you're showing them that the path that they're about to enter into for the next 40 or 50 years is a futile one, and they look for different answers. So again, that would be something that I could agree with you on as far as a hope for. I don't like the word change because it's so perverted now, but hope for a dynamic shift. How about that? It would be.
Well, I mean, it's saying that, and I mean, one of the things that I emphasize a lot is entrepreneurialism. I'm an entrepreneur. I built a company, a modest-sized company, just a consultancy, but I work for myself and for my clients first.
Right.
But I see the economy shifting in such a way, and I talk with folks, and I talk with a lot of folks. A lot of young people. I mean, do you really want to go work for? Not that this is really an option anyway. But do you want to work for a company for 30 years? Most people don't. They want a steady stream of income and some degree of security so they can pay their mortgage. But they'd like to be free. And there are a lot of younger folks who are much more okay with not having a paycheck that has a Fortune 500 company stamped on that check, and they're cool with that. And that is fundamentally different from their parents. And
I love that. I love that. And the problem is the stifling of the atmosphere in the crony capitalism. That the stifling of the innovation is immense right now.
Absolutely, and so yes. So for the not so, for the bad part. I mean, that's one of the reasons why. I mean, I see a lot of young people who have this general disposition, but then you look at the system and go, okay, well, how do I take advantage of this system? Well, what's interesting is that a lot of the entrepreneurs that we hear about are getting government grants or, some kind of technology that somebody somewhere likes in some agency or whatever. Right. And that's baloney, Well, what we need is organic growth of somebody who can take an idea where they're not regulated to death on the front end so they can compete with the big guys. And the big guys have signed on to crony capitalism like, they
own it.
Oh, they do, man. And the internet tax thing is a great example.
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring that up, but go ahead.
Amazon lobbied for the tax. Over the past 5 years, they've essentially created these distribution networks that are much more local. And so they figured they're going to have to pay the tax anyway. And they might as well take out the mid-sized retailers that are knocking out, that are nipping at their heels. With new and innovative ideas, pushing them, and basically make it so these people have to adhere to the rules of 9,800 different taxing, jurisdictions.
Yeah,
I mean the cost of that is immense.
Yeah,
if you're a $10 million retailer, that's not really that big. Good luck complying with that red tape.
Yeah,
but Amazon will be able to do it.
Sure, they will, and I don't know how many I know their nearest one is, I believe to me, is Fernley, Nevada, but they're certainly, they don't compete now because of their, at least online with some of these smaller retailers because of their size. I mean, they're brick and mortar. I mean, in a lot of their aspects, they're brick and mortar because they need such a big distribution, and so the crony capitalist aspect of it is they get to that point, but once they get to that point. They wield so much influence that a small start that internet tax that is going if we are in some kind of economic uptick a lot of that is due because of the guest I had on last that started his own food company. He's an entrepreneur and he went out and he did it. It is so counterintuitive. To building a sustainable, healthy country, let alone economy, it seems destined to fail under its own corruption. Well, but here we are. You're 37. I'm older than that, and we don't know anything else.
Absolutely. By the way, one other thing on the Amazon thing. Guess what? These smaller retailers, they can become affiliates though through Amazon.
For Amazon, okay.
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's what, I believe that something needs to, obviously we all probably listening to the show, watching the show, you and I think significant things need to change in a big way. Yeah. But we have got to free up this economy. We would be probably out of this thing entirely if we had just freed up the economy, allowed some oxygen to come into the economy. Stop regulating entrepreneurs to death.
I agree with that 100%. I think the first start would have been to, let the banking system do what it wanted to do, which is come apart.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because David Stockman, again, as we talked about at the beginning.
What did he say about that? What is his take on it?
He said that basically, and I have come to agree with this assessment, that essentially the financial crisis wasn't a widespread financial crisis, that ATMs would not have gone black. What would have happened is that the 6 big banks up on Wall Street would have eaten it. They would have failed. And a lot of very powerful people would have to go home with their tail between their legs. And, they'd have to deal with only having, $300 or $400 or $500 million to play with in the Hamptons, And what would have happened is the mid-sized banks that ran their books well, like, for instance, BB&T, great bank, would have filled in the space fairly quickly. There would have been a disruption. There would have been a disruption for sure, but the better run banks would have survived. But basically,
and that's called a little something called free market.
That's right.
Capitalism, where failure is a giant part. Bankruptcy and failure is a giant part of how the system works. Again, we think, because we haven't grown up in that. At least we understand an idea of what failure is if you're not in that crony set, and how purging of debt and purging of companies that have mismanaged themselves is important.
On that point, so out west, in Las Vegas, a bunch of these banks have bought up, just massive numbers of homes.
Yeah.
And now they're like super landlords essentially, and they're deriving yield off of their investment, which
that's right,
or whatever. Yeah. But think about this. So these banks failed, right? Because they managed.
You're make you mad. You're going to make me mad. I know. Here we go.
They managed their books way worse than the people who are in those houses who probably made mistakes for sure, right? But weren't those people in those houses weren't leveraged 100 to 1. No. Or 150 to 1. They were. No. They may have made some dumb mistakes, but not that.
They in most cases were not even 100 to 1. That's right. So but you.
Let me finish this point. The thing is, but what happens? They failed because of their poor mistakes. The taxpayer, the people who own the homes at that point,
and
pay their taxes, bail them out, then get foreclosed on. Okay. Then those banks that got saved turn around and buy the homes of the people who got foreclosed on, and now the foreclosed people get to rent their house back from the bank that they saved in the first place. That is sick.
Okay, well, now you've qualified to be a guest host on Wide Awake News Radio, because that's the kind of crap that I talk about every single day that absolutely frosts me. And you could take it so much deeper than that. The controlling of the rental market, so the rental incomes are still there. The derivatives now that are being talked about by these same institutions, or these bundling rental properties in order to invest. It really does. It makes me crazy. It is what it does, and it makes me hate with every fiber of my being crony capitalism. And that's why I'm glad we have Nick Sorrentino out there with againstcronycapitalism.org. Nick, we are out of time. Always interesting and nice to hear your perspective and the truth on what you're seeing in Washington and in that part of the world, because we need that perspective. I mean, we're out here, at least for my part, I'm out here in the middle of the country, and I think things are seen a little bit different, but it's important to understand how it's perceived in the prosperous regions. Nick, thank you very much. AgainstCronyCapitalism.org. We'll get you back on again.
Awesome. Nice talking with you.
Always a pleasure. All right, guys, stay tuned for Jeff Rins, because he is coming up next. Again, please remember, congratulations, Brett Waite, and your soon-to-be missus. We wish you the best and a long and happy marriage, and we will be back on regular time on Monday. Enjoy the rebroadcast. There'll be some good ones. All right, enjoy Jeff. He's coming up next. Have a good night. Peace.